My name is Catherine. I'm 34 years old, and I've been staying with my mom at our family house ever since my dad died 3 years ago. I decided to stay because I didn't want to leave my mom alone. So I've been here for 3 years now. During this time, some really bad people came to see us. These people were my own brother, Bob, and his wife, Jane. I've known Bob since he was born, and Jane has been his girlfriend since they were in middle school. Bob used to bring Jane home during vacations, so I got to know her too. To be honest, I can't forget about those two. They used to bully me just for fun. Both of my parents were usually busy with work, so they weren't around much on weekends. But when they were gone, that's when the bad stuff happened. We lived in a big mansion that my dad, who was a CEO, built for us. But one time, they told me to play hide and seek in the mansion, and when I hid in a closet, my brother and Jane filled it with stuff, trapping me inside. I'd be stuck in there until just before my parents came home, and then my mom would scold me for messing up the closet. One day, my mom came home early from work and caught Bob and Jane stuffing me in the closet and blocking the door. She was really mad. After that, they never locked me in the closet again, but they kept bothering me. I was angry at my parents for not being there when I needed them. I resented Bob and Jane, but I also felt mad at my parents for not helping me. Then, when I was in middle school, Bob and Jane did something really mean. They cut up my school uniform with scissors, wrote all over my textbooks, and even ruined my cushions and bedding. I found out later that Bob and Jane were in high school at the time, and they were angry because they got bad grades on their exams and their parents scolded them. That's probably why they took such a mean revenge on me. I was shocked in my messed up room. Why was this happening to me? Why wouldn't anyone help me? I stood there lost in those thoughts. Then, when I didn't come to dinner, my mom came to check on me and saw my room. She screamed, and my dad came running too. My brother came in last, struggling to hold back his laughter. He couldn't help but chuckle sometimes. Surprised, my parents looked at me as I said, "Mom, Dad, I want to leave this house." Tears started flowing as soon as I spoke. No one is helping me. Bob and Jane are always mean to me together. They've ruined my toys, my school stuff, and my clothes. I don't want to live here anymore. I'm mad at both of you, Dad and Mom. You haven't helped me. It was probably the first time I cried so much in front of my family. Before that, I just quietly endured and cried alone when things were tough. But this time, I cried loudly like a child. Seeing me like that, my mom hugged me and said, "I'm sorry for everything." Even my brother, after seeing how upset I was, seemed to understand how serious it was. He tried to leave, but my dad stopped him. "Do you understand what you've done? This is serious," my father said. Even though he wasn't yelling, his voice was scary, even to me, who wasn't being scolded. "Come on, Dad. It's not like we committed a crime. We were just having some fun," my brother replied. "Destruction of property is a crime. You need to understand that you have to make up for it," my father explained. But Catherine is family, and I'm still young. Minors can't be criminals, can they? My brother protested. My father sighed deeply at my brother's excuse. True, as a minor, you might not have the means to pay. But as parents, we're responsible for your actions. If you can't compensate, we'll have to. It's time for you to go live with your uncle. Uncle? My father's younger brother was known for being strict and disliked dishonesty. He was like a scary figure to the neighborhood kids, similar to a boogeyman. While he was nice to well-behaved children like me, he had no patience for troublemakers like my brother, Bob, and Jane. Bob never got along with him. "No, I don't want to live with Uncle. I promise I'll behave better," my brother begged. "I've heard that promise too many times. When you and Jane locked Catherine in the closet, when you two chased her around, when you threw bugs at her even though you knew she was scared, every time we found out, we scolded you and you always promised to stop. But you kept doing it anyway. We can't have someone in our home who hurts our family, even if they're family themselves. You're not welcome here anymore," my father declared. After my father's declaration, he grabbed Bob by the neck and took him away. Later on, I learned that my parents were really upset with Bob's behavior. Even after being scolded, Bob didn't seem to get why he was in trouble. He just kept bothering me. I figured he was beyond help. Some people just don't understand how to behave in society. I learned that from watching Bob and Jane. Originally, Bob planned to go to university using our father's money after high school. But our father didn't think he'd do well there. He said, You'll just cause trouble for others." So Bob ended up working at our uncle's company right after high school, but he seemed desperate to leave. As soon as he graduated, he and Jane rented an apartment together. They decided to live together without any help from our parents or uncle for rent or expenses. Later on, Bob asked me to lend him some money, even though I was just starting high school and didn't have a job. All the money I had saved up before, which Bob used to steal when he lived with us, was given back to me by my parents. I kept track of it in a notebook. So, I did have money saved, but I wasn't going to give it to him. I told Bob, "Aren't you embarrassed to ask your high school sister for money? I don't even have a job, so I don't have extra money to give you." After that, I told my parents about Bob's request, and they were angry. They promised not to help him anymore. I thought Bob and Jane should learn to live on their own without relying on others. From then on, I focused on my studies. I worked hard and went to college. After graduating, I got a job and continued learning new things. I was so busy with my own life that I forgot all about Bob. As I had forgotten about him, an invitation to Bob's wedding arrived at our house. The bride was Jane, of course, his partner. So they're finally tying the knot. I thought as my parents and I discussed whether we should go to the wedding of a family member. However, a few days before the wedding, my father collapsed and was taken away by an ambulance. He had always been frail, but this was the first time he had collapsed, so my mother and I panicked and called for help. During this crisis, I reached out to my brother, but he brushed me off, saying, "I'm getting married soon. Don't bother me during this important time." Even when I told him our father was urgently hospitalized, he dismissed it, saying, "He just tripped, right? Make sure you come to my wedding." Then he hung up. Sadly, our father passed away shortly after. With the funeral arrangements underway, my mother and I informed my brother that we couldn't attend his wedding. Despite his insistence that we should be there, my mother and I decided not to go. We also let Jane's parents know about our father's passing and our inability to attend. While Jane's parents understood, my brother and Jane accused us of disrespect for not attending. The message my mother and I received on our voicemail accusing us of rudeness was so absurd that it made me wonder who the real rude person was. While we were focused on arranging our father's funeral, my brother and Jane went ahead with their wedding without considering our loss. After that, my mother and I never brought it up, but we felt like our relationship with my brother was completely broken. Then, out of nowhere, my brother showed up at our door. When I answered the intercom and he said he had a delivery, I wasn't expecting him to be there in person. When I opened the door, there he was, along with Jane, carrying large suitcases. They pushed past me and barged into the house. "Hey, hold on, what's going on?" I protested. It seemed like my brother had forgotten our father's words, who had told him never to come back to our house. Despite that, they both barged in, dropped their luggage in the hallway, and started talking nonsense to me. "You and Mom need to leave this house right now," my brother demanded. "What? Mom has dementia, remember?" I was stunned. What was my brother talking about? It had been 3 years since our father passed away, and he hadn't apologized, visited the grave, or done anything to make amends. And now, he was asking for our family mansion. On top of that, he was assuming our mother had dementia and planning to kick her out. I was left speechless. Then our mother appeared from a room in the back. "Catherine, what's happening?" As she saw my brother, she said something shocking. "Oh, who are you? If you're a stranger, please leave," she said. My brother and Jane laughed at her. "See, this happens every time we see her. Her dementia must be getting worse. You take care of Mom. I'll take the mansion. I'm the oldest son, so I should get it," my brother declared as he walked further into the house. Jane, copying my brother, turned to me and our mother and said, "Take the old lady and go. I never want to see you again." I hurried to my mother's side and asked, "Mom, are you all right?" We felt like we were being pushed out, so we left the mansion, leaving all the old furniture behind. My mother and I gathered our things and left the house. Luckily, a friend of mine who heard about our situation offered us his house. He was overseas and couldn't take care of it himself. Originally, his cousin looked after the house, but since he's moving to another state next year, it seemed like a good opportunity for us. When we arrived at the house and unpacked, my mother and I finally felt relieved. Then my mother chuckled and said, "We've left that house, but I still don't like how Bob and Jane behave. Maybe we should sell the house," she suggested. I asked my mother about what Bob said regarding her having dementia. She explained, "That's just a story they made up. About 2 years ago, they started asking me for money all the time, but they didn't even attend their father's funeral, and they never bothered to check on me afterward." I couldn't believe their audacity to ask for money after all they'd done, so every time they asked, I pretended not to know them and said, "Who? I don't know you. You're a stranger to me, right?" "Oh, I understand now," I remarked. It seemed Bob and Jane misinterpreted my mother's deliberate distance and treated her like a stranger because she wanted nothing to do with them anymore. They thought her indifference meant she genuinely didn't remember them, leading them to believe she had dementia. Regardless, I believed it was wrong to kick someone out of their home, especially if they thought they had dementia. My mother quickly decided to sell the mansion. We had been discussing selling it ever since my father passed away, as it was too big for just the two of us. At that time, an executive from my father's company, where I was being trained as a successor, expressed interest in buying it. So the buyer was almost certain. We just needed to go through the paperwork. When I spoke to a real estate contact and explained the situation to the executive, they agreed that leaving the mansion with Bob and Jane would lead to serious problems. It was clear that action needed to be taken swiftly. A week later, our phones wouldn't stop ringing. Bob called my mother while Jane called me repeatedly. They probably wanted to tell us the same thing, but we found it amusing and decided to ignore them for 30 minutes and just enjoy our tea. As we chatted, an hour passed without us realizing it, and it seemed like Bob and Jane had been trying to reach us the whole time. When I finally answered Jane's call, she exclaimed, "Finally. Why didn't you answer sooner? There's a big problem. The house has been taken over." "Wait, didn't you two take over the house?" "I think it says who should be saying that we've been taken over," I retorted. "No, Bob and I were living in this mansion, but now some strangers have shown up and are demanding that we leave. They just barged in and are trying to kick us out. Our mansion has been taken over," she exclaimed. I couldn't help but burst out laughing. I really wanted to remind her that they were the ones who invaded the house in the first place and were unlawfully occupying it. Chuckling a bit, I replied, "You're talking about being taken over, but you're not even the legal owners. My mother, who was the rightful owner, has sold the house to someone else. So strangers who have no connection to the property should quickly move out." "What? She sold it? This mansion?" She sounded shocked. "But this mansion belongs to Bob," she protested. "When did anyone ever say that?" I questioned. "Well, no one explicitly said it, but Bob is the eldest son. Isn't it natural for him to eventually inherit this house, the property, and his dad's company? And I'll be living as the elegant wife of the CEO in this mansion," Jane argued. Despite her confidence, Jane seemed panicked. I couldn't help but burst out laughing again. The fact that she assumed Bob would automatically inherit the mansion and become the CEO of the company his father ran was astonishing. Such naive thinking, I thought to myself. Given Jane's strong belief, Bob probably also thought he would inherit both the mansion and the company, even though no one had ever promised him that. Once more, I couldn't help but laugh at Jane's words. "Bob is the boss, and you're his wife? How can you even think that's possible? You both started at the company without any special training or education to run it," I chuckled. Jane seemed surprised by my teasing. She shot back, "Well, I might inherit the company from my uncle then." I laughed even harder. "You should check the company news first. And about my uncle's business, his cousin's son is already running it." "What? So Bob can't be CEO, and I can't be a CEO's wife?" Jane couldn't believe it. "That's right. Can I hang up now?" "I don't think I need to talk to strangers anymore," I said. "Please, Catherine, wait. Can you give us some money?" Jane pleaded. I hung up the call, but later I heard what happened next from Uncle. Bob and Jane didn't want to leave the mansion. They clung to the pillars and refused to go. Uncle had to come and pick them up. It turns out, since they were hired by Uncle's company, they were undergoing strict training, and they were so scared that they cried when Uncle took them away. They were taken to a mountain retreat owned by one of Uncle's friends because they were too unpredictable on their own. Uncle warned them that if they didn't behave at the retreat, they'd be stuck there forever. Despite this, they tried to escape multiple times but got caught every time. Meanwhile, the person who was supposed to manage the house was my fiancé, who's currently working abroad. I'm living in his parents' house now. He's planning to come back home this year, so we'll start planning our wedding soon. My mother and uncle who helped us will be invited to the wedding, but Bob and Jane won't be invited.
Welcome, my maid. Even though she must know I'm here for a marriage introduction, this is the first thing she says. What? I let out a voice of confusion, thinking I must have misheard. My future mother-in-law, Linda, looks at me with a mean smile. Oh, you weren't the maid? You've got such a poor-looking face. And the defiance I thought was on my side betrayed me in the worst way. Glancing at my face, David bursts out laughing. You're right. She does have a poor-looking face. I'd love to see her parents. Really? I wonder if your parents would faint from shock at seeing a house as wealthy as ours. Linda and David kept looking down on me. They even looked down on my parents. I couldn't stand it any longer. I sent a message to my father while Linda and David were not looking. My father immediately replied that he will come right away. I'm going to get some fresh air. I can no longer bear listening to David's insults. Don't run away. David's crude laughter echoes. I left the seat to wait for my father's arrival. 10 minutes later, I introduced my father, Christopher, to David and his mother. Here's the slave's father. His voice is calm, but his eyes are not smiling. Wait, father? Linda, knowing my father's face, freezes in a grand manner. I am Susan, turning 30 this year. Working in a small company, I've lived my life trying not to stand out. Thus, my usual makeup is just foundation, and I prefer wearing navy or black. I don't wear contacts, and instead wear thick glasses due to my high prescription. The reason for being so thorough is because my father had a high-profile jobs, and I've been influenced by it since childhood. My father is an actor. Apparently, he was quite popular back in the day, often surrounded by women when walking through town. Though a supporting role, he appears on TV quite often and is moderately well known. Middle school was quite tough because of my father. Classmates would ask for his autograph, and their parents would ask to meet him. Since I refused all these requests, I was often criticized. I must have seemed unfair to them. I even faced harassment from jealous classmates. I didn't want to trouble my beloved father. I also hated the thought of being seen as the one getting carried away. Struggling with these thoughts, I dressed plainly and went to a high school where no one knew me. Fortunately, I had a common surname, so I could live normally from high school. And maybe because of my plain appearance, men didn't approach me. Thus, I could enjoy a carefree student life. I loved talking about comics with my female friends, and those times felt like the happiest. I met my fiancé David after becoming a working adult. David worked for the leasing company of the copy machine our company uses. My direct interactions with David were minimal. David would regularly check on the copy machine, and we would exchange a few words during his visits. Our relationship took a significant turn when the copy machine broke. That day, I was busy preparing materials for a meeting happening the next day. But then, the copy machine stopped working. I was in trouble. Without it, I wouldn't be able to prepare the materials for tomorrow's meeting. In panic, I called David. He came quickly and checked the copy machine. Can it be fixed? I asked David anxiously, and he replied with a smile. Don't worry, I'll take care of it. I fell in love with David's smile in an instant. The rest is history. Unfortunately, the copy machine wasn't fixed, but David arranged for a replacement. We managed to prepare the materials in time for the meeting. Having fallen for David, I made an effort to get closer to him. I asked for his contact information and called him often. Then, I confessed my feelings to David, and we started dating. David was always very kind. He was always considerate, and I had never seen him angry. I thought he would continue to be kind, even after knowing about my father. So, after dating for 3 months, I boldly proposed to David. He happily accepted. I remember being very happy. However, there was one thing I was concerned about. It was my appearance. I had always worn thick glasses. Even on dates, I dressed plainly. It's a habit that's hard to break. The real me looks just like my father, with distinct features. Because of my appearance, I was envied by girls in middle school. I've been judged by guys based on my looks before, and it's been tough. But I thought it would be okay with David. From now on, I thought of changing my appearance little by little for David, whom I love. That's what I thought. However, after getting engaged to David, I started feeling more and more uncomfortable. Before our engagement, David seemed like a kind person, but recently he started making remarks that seemed to look down on me. The other day, we went to a bridal fair to decide on a wedding venue. Since David suggested it, the place David took me to was a dazzling world. It was a luxurious guest house, perfect for a large wedding with over 100 guests. Seeing that scene, I felt confused. I don't have many friends from my school days, and I didn't want to stand out, so I had hoped for a small ceremony at a small venue. I wanted to go home right away, but David seemed to be enjoying himself, so I couldn't bring it up. So I endured and spent the time there. After it was all over and we stopped by a cafe, David was in a very good mood. The wedding venue we saw earlier was nice, wasn't it? I personally would like something even more extravagant, he said while drinking coffee. This could mean we end up choosing the venue we saw earlier. Feeling anxious, I decided to talk to David about what I wanted. I was thinking a wedding with just the two of us might be nice. I don't like standing out too much. I thought the kind David would surely compromise. However, the reality was completely different. David looked at me and laughed scornfully. Indeed, a plain girl like you wouldn't suit a venue like we saw earlier. There's probably no dress that suits those thick glasses of yours. What? I was bewildered by David's remark. Isn't a wedding about both families? My family is wealthy, and not having a certain level of wedding would be embarrassing, he continued. I was speechless. The David who had always been kind was now looking down on me as if he was a different person. I was deeply shocked by David's attitude. And to the bewildered me, David made an even worse comment. You should just keep quiet and do as I say. A plain woman like you should be grateful to be getting married at all. Suddenly, David became serious, throwing harsh words at me. I was so baffled by his remark. I even felt scared by David's words. Then the next moment, David smiled and said, I'll decide everything for you, so you just need to do as I say. Okay. I didn't know how to respond and just smiled awkwardly. Maybe getting engaged to David was a mistake, but it's too late to act as if it never happened. I've already reported our engagement to both our parents and my company. And despite all this, I still love David. Maybe he would return to the kind David I knew before our engagement. So, despite my confusion about David's change, I had no choice but to continue with the engagement. David continued to make comments that troubled me. With each one, my heart grew more wounded. But I couldn't bring myself to hate David. Even when I thought about breaking up, the kind David I knew flashed through my mind. I still love David after all. Despite my confusion about David's change, I continued our relationship. And then one day, something happened that confused me even more. It was the day David and I finalized our wedding venue. After visiting several venues, David decided on the luxurious guest house we first visited. With pride, David said, I guess a lavish ceremony really suits me. It's unfortunate for you, though. David laughed, hurting me. And for the paperwork of the wedding venue, we went to that guest house with David. On the way, I encountered someone. Oh, is that you, David? Mom, what are you doing here? David looked surprised at the woman. Then David introduced her to me. Susan, this is my mom, Linda. Mom, this is Susan. She's my fiancée. I told you I was getting married, remember? Linda greeted me with a smile. I'm David's mother. You seem like a serious woman. Where do you work? You must be working at a major corporation, right? This was my first meeting with David's mother. I answered nervously about my company and that I do clerical work. Then Linda made a puzzled face. I've never heard of that company. That's when David joined our conversation. Susan's company is one of my sales destinations. It's a small company with about 30 employees, so it's natural that you don't know it. Upon hearing David's explanation, Linda's face turned grim. I thought since you were David's fiancée, you'd be working at a more reputable company. Doesn't that mean your salary is low? Are you planning to make David suffer? I'm sorry. Indeed, my salary isn't very high at my current company. That's why I had no choice but to apologize to Linda. Then, Linda sighed heavily and said, Can you at least not rely entirely on David? Our family is of a distinguished lineage. We don't need a woman of unclear origin. Okay. I responded to Linda's remark with confusion, but Linda became even more heated. What about your parents? They work at reputable companies, right? Linda glared at me with narrowed eyes. My father is. As I was about to answer Linda's question with confusion, my eyes drifted to her bag, because I saw something familiar. Then I fell silent. Seeing me, David spoke up. Come on, Mom. Calm down. We're going to visit the house and make our marriage introduction soon. All right, though I'm not really in a welcoming mood. Linda glared at me with a sour face. It seems my first impression on Linda was the worst. The path to marriage seemed too steep, and I secretly sighed. And then came the day of the marriage introduction. Wow. I couldn't help but mutter in front of David's family home. The scene before me far exceeded my expectations. Since Linda had mentioned that their family was of a distinguished lineage, I had expected David's family to be wealthy. But the reality before me was even more astonishing. The gate was automatic, there was an elevator inside, and there were even 10 luxury cars parked outside. Surely, they must be the hobbies of my father-in-law. David then spoke to me. Dad is out for work today. It's just Mom, so make yourself comfortable, David said with a smile. But my face became even more strained. Linda had been harsh to me last time. Surely, she will make some sarcastic remarks again. Then, David and I entered the living room where Linda was waiting. Hello. Thank you for the other day. I greeted Linda politely. The next moment, Linda said something unbelievable. Welcome, my maid. Even though she must know I'm here for a marriage introduction, this is the first thing she says. What? I let out a voice of confusion, thinking I must have misheard. Linda looks at me with a mean smile. Oh, you weren't the maid? You've got such a poor-looking face. A maid? How could she say something so terrible? Then Linda laughed with a look of enjoyment. David told me, it's okay to treat you like a maid. It seems like David just wanted to marry someone who would do as he says. Too bad for you. David, what do you mean? I asked David with a pale face. It must be a bad joke. I wanted to believe that. And the fiance I thought was on my side betrayed me in the worst way. Glancing at my face, David burst out laughing. You're right. She does have a poor-looking face. I'd love to see her parents. Maybe we could use her parents as our servants too. David laughs vulgarly. Indeed, having someone obedient for free is attractive, but if they come to a wealthy house like ours, I wonder if Susan's parents would faint from shock. Linda and David continue to look down on me. And Linda asks with a laugh, By the way, what does your father do? He's not homeless, is he? That's not. Then David burst into laughter and replied to Linda, Mom, that's not a jobs. Since Susan is like this, it's certain he doesn't have a stable job. Ah, I'm laughing so hard my stomach hurts. David and Linda continue to look down on my parents. They assumed my family's education was low and decided they must have a plain appearance. I grit my teeth in frustration, listening to their remarks. Linda and David were too rude. They even looked down on my parents. I couldn't stand it any longer. I sent a message to my father while Linda and David weren't looking. I need you to come now. I also sent him the map to David's family home, which David had sent me for today's marriage introduction. I remembered that today was my father's day off. He must be relaxing at home right now. Fortunately, my father replied within a minute. I'm on my way. Seeing my father's reply, I felt relieved. Then I spoke to David and Linda. I'm feeling a bit unwell, so I'm going to get some fresh air. I couldn't bear listening to David and his remarks any longer. I thought I would wait outside quietly until my father arrived. That's what I thought. Oh, is that so? Well then, David, why don't we continue our tea leisurely? Linda seemed pleased to be alone with David. Susan, don't you run away. David's crude laughter echoed. I left the seat and waited outside for my father's arrival. 10 minutes later, my father appeared wearing dark sunglasses. Susan, what's wrong? Today was supposed to be your marriage introduction, right? I was surprised to be called out all of a sudden. My father asked me with a puzzled look. Dad, I'm just so frustrated. Seeing my father, I felt relieved and started to cry. No matter how much I tried to hold back, tears kept flowing. What's wrong, Susan? My father began to panic seeing me cry. I explained everything to my father. How David's attitude changed after we got engaged, and how Linda joined him in looking down on me. I can't forgive them for looking down on you without knowing anything about you. I couldn't stop crying as I explained. My father listened to my story silently, but it seemed he was quietly angry. Then I told my father something about Linda. At that moment, my father laughed. He took off his sunglasses and handed them to me. We're going in now. I'll make sure they regret hurting you. I made up my mind with my father's words. My love for David had faded. All that was left was hatred. I've made my decision. We'll make David and his mom regret it. I did something then, put on my father's sunglasses. Then, together with my father, we entered David's family home. I stood in front of David and Linda, bringing my father with me. Sorry to keep you waiting. Me, standing firm with my father. Seeing me wearing sunglasses. Why are you suddenly wearing sunglasses? Linda, who initially laughed seeing me, became stunned upon seeing the man beside me. I realized people freeze when they are too surprised. Surely, Linda must have thought she could say something terrible again when I returned. But unfortunately for her, I won't let things go her way. I'm planning to drag her through hell instead. Linda must already recognize who my father was. Then my father spoke to Linda. I'm the maid's father. His voice was calm, but his eyes were not smiling. His handsome face made him appear even more formidable. What? Linda, who likely recognized my father, was shocked. How could this be? Why is Christopher here? Is this some sort of surprise? Linda spoke with agitation, her cheeks turning a bit red. Her eyes sparkled like those of a young girl. David seemed clueless, standing there stunned. My father didn't answer Linda's question, but kept staring at David and Linda. Linda blushed under my father's gaze. It's embarrassing for a woman of her age. I looked at Linda coldly. Then David, regaining his composure, asked in confusion, Christopher, Mom, is he a friend of yours? David probably doesn't know about my father. I guess he's quite well known among Linda's generation. But younger people might not know unless they watch dramas on TV. Then Linda glared at David. David, how rude of you. This man is a famous actor and my first love. What? David looked incredulous. Then Linda turned towards my father, smiling and speaking to him. I'm a big fan of you, Christopher. See, look at this. Linda brought out her purse to show my father. It's a keychain that can only be bought by a fan club member. I've been a fan of you for over 20 years. Linda began to express her admiration as a longtime fan of my father. Mom. David seemed appalled by Linda's sudden change in behavior. Linda continued to speak to my father. Surely, the presence of her favorite actor had greatly elevated her mood. However, my father's gaze on Linda was very stern. Then, after remaining silent until now, my father finally spoke up. I understand that you're a fan of mine. However, did you try to treat my precious daughter, Susan, as a maid? Linda, who had been highly spirited until now, turned pale and froze. She trembled visibly, which was evident from her shaking. Ignoring Linda, my father continued, "And you assumed I was homeless without even meeting me. That's quite rude of you." Saying so, my father glared at Linda. Linda started to panic. No, I didn't know Susan's father was you. Having you join the family is more than welcome. Right, David? Yes, of course. David seemed pushed by Linda. Then, Linda tried to justify herself to my father. I was dumbfounded listening to Linda. She had been looking down on me and my father until she saw him. And just like that, she changed her tone. It was nothing but distrust. If you look closely, Susan is a wonderful woman who resembles Christopher. And my earlier comments were just out of jealousy for fear of losing my son. If I had known about you, I would have behaved more politely. Linda desperately tried to make amends. My father looked at her as if she was bothersome. Watching their interaction, I thought, I can't let my father be troubled any further. This was my issue. I should be the one to speak up to Linda. So I told Linda, I'm breaking off the engagement with David, so there's no way you'll become family with Dad. What? Susan, I'm sorry. This is my chance to become family with Christopher. Please reconsider. Linda tried to persuade me with a face that looked almost tearful. After all her terrible behavior towards me, even her tearful face couldn't be trusted. I looked at her coldly. Yet, Linda thought she could somehow convince me seeing me silent. She smiled at me. You want to marry David, don't you? I won't oppose to it anymore. It's okay. I'll do anything for you. Linda clung to me, desperate to become family with my father. Her willingness to do anything was the complete opposite of her initial stance. I felt contempt for Linda, who changed her opinions so frequently. I murmured softly, No, thank you. What? What did you say? Linda tilted her head, as if she hadn't heard me. So, I shouted louder this time, I absolutely do not want to become family with you. What? Linda was taken aback by my outcry. I confronted Linda with my feelings. You made derogatory remarks the moment you heard about my job, and you spoke terribly about my father. I can never forgive that. I made my stance clear to Linda. But, seeing Linda turn to my father, as if realizing persuading me was futile, she spoke to him with a smile. Susan says this, but Christopher, you want your daughter to be happy, right? Our family is wealthy, and surely your daughter will be happy with us. Indeed, some people might think happiness comes with money, but not me. Perhaps understanding my feelings, my father counted Linda's words. Susan values love over money. Besides, our family has money. I, being an actor, earn a decent amount. Linda was at a loss for words. It wasn't surprising. After all, my father is a famous actor who frequently appears in dramas and doesn't struggle with money. Given our family's wealth, there's no merit for me to marry just for money. Linda fell silent, likely unable to come up with a good counter-argument. Then, seeing Linda silent, my father continued. You say you're a fan of mine, but I despise someone who neglects my precious daughter. Could you please not call yourself a fan anymore? Saying that, my father glared at Linda. Then Linda burst into tears. If Christopher hates me, I won't be able to live. Linda sobbed uncontrollably. Until now silent, David began to speak. Seeing me silent, you've been making quite a remark, Susan. You'll regret it if you break off our engagement. No one will want someone like you. David laughed. Wait a minute, David. Linda, concerned about my father, tried to stop David. But David didn't stop. I chose a plain woman like you, thinking you'd be obedient. I was planning to cheat on you with cute girls once we were married. So annoying that my plans are not going to work anymore. Hearing David talk about things I hadn't even asked, I calmly realized there was never any love from David. He just wanted a convenient woman who would obey him. My love for David had long since faded. While I was thinking this, David kept making selfish statements. You. My father gritted his teeth, looking like he might grab David any moment. It seemed like my turn to fight back. Dad, wait. So I stopped my father. I let out a smile while still wearing my sunglasses. What's up? David seemed a bit taken aback by my composed smile. Is this still plain? I took off the sunglasses I was wearing with a flourish. What? David froze, looking at my face. It was only natural. I had applied makeup after meeting my father and crying. Normally, I only wore foundation. But now, I had on eyeshadow, mascara, and eyeliner. I had done my makeup right after crying over meeting my father. Though it was just eye makeup, I think it significantly changed my appearance. Is that really you, Susan? David's face turned a bit red. He must have been mesmerized by my makeup-enhanced face. Yes, it's me. I've always downplayed my looks to avoid standing out. But I've decided to stop hiding myself. Until now, I stood out unwillingly because of my father. So I had been modest to avoid attention. But being spoken ill of by David and Linda made me think it's okay to stand out a bit and show my true self. David, with a flushed face, said, If you had been like this from the beginning, I would have been nice to you. Even now, we can start over. Come on, let's get engaged again. And introduce me to some beautiful actresses through your father. Who would go on with the engagement now? And the audacity to ask for actress introductions. I made my stance clear to David. The engagement is over. I don't need someone like you anymore. I'll cancel the wedding venue too. What? David was stunned. But I wasn't about to let him off that easily. I continued to corner David. Of course, you'll be bearing the cancellation fee for the wedding venue. That's only fair. Linda exclaimed in confusion. Wait a minute. It's too much to bear the entire cost. David, looking perplexed, was unable to retort. Then my father spoke up. Why not have David's father cover it? With all those luxury cars, it shouldn't be a problem, right? My father said this with a refreshing smile. Here, I played my trump card. If you're not satisfied, we can go to court. But remember, my father is a famous actor. News about this might provoke his extreme fans, who could retaliate. My father has many enthusiastic fans. A critic who once bad-mouthed my father as a poor actor faced severe consequences. Prank calls, letters with knives. The extent of the harassment was unimaginable. It was even covered in the news at one point. Linda, recalling that incident, turned pale. She frantically persuaded David. David, you must bear all the cancellation fees. We don't know what might happen. Seeing Linda's expression, David seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation. What? Are you kidding? David fell to his knees, a look of despair on his face. I don't need you in my life. Dad, let's go home. Ignoring the dejected David and Linda, I left the place with my father. The engagement with David was thus broken off for good. And David ended up being responsible for the entire cancellation fee of the wedding venue. It turns out my father-in-law is the head of a company, and my father had once appeared in a commercial for that company. Because of this connection between my father and my father-in-law, my father informed him about David and Linda's actions. Naturally unaware of the situation, my father-in-law was furious. He confronted David and Linda harshly. He even pressured David to bear the full cost of the wedding venue cancellation. As a result, David was saddled with a hefty financial burden. The repercussions extended to Linda as well. She was faced with divorce initiated by my father-in-law. Their treatment of us was one thing, but that wasn't the only reason. Apparently, Linda had a habit of wasteful spending. She had spent a considerable amount on fan activities for my father. The source of this spending was my father-in-law's money. It seems my father-in-law had already lost patience with Linda. Moreover, my father revealed that Linda had sent him rather inappropriate love letters. I want to divorce and marry you, Christopher. My current husband is just a source of money. She had written such content in love letters to my father. This enraged my father-in-law. Despite Linda's resistance, the divorce was finalized with the involvement of lawyers. I heard rumors that Linda, this wasn't supposed to happen, was living in tears, lamenting. Additionally, she was expelled from my father's fan club. She had engaged in quite troublesome fan activities, so it was probably inevitable. I can't imagine happiness coming Linda's way after losing everything. It's a case of getting what she deserved. 6 months later, astonishingly, David was arrested. The reason was his stalking behavior towards me. Unable to forget me after I took off my sunglasses that day, David began to frequently appear in front of me. He started to loiter in front of my house. Even after I quit my jobs, he called me often, begging me to reconsider the engagement, crying over the phone, "I need you, no one else will do." But he was only fixated on my looks. Then crying, David clung to his phone, but in the end, he was probably only looking at my face. It's a huge difference from before and after I put on makeup. I don't need a man who only judges by looks. I politely refused and then blocked his calls. However, David's actions only escalated. I consulted the police several times, and sometimes I was threatened with danger. After much deliberation, I finally filed a report with the police. My father agreed with this decision. Ultimately, David was arrested for trying to forcibly enter our house. Following his arrest, it seems David was fired from his job. All that's left for David now is a significant amount of debt. Surely, he won't be able to lead a decent life anymore. It's the punishment for looking down on people so much. Since then, I have been working as my father's manager. The job is much more challenging than my previous clerical work. Managing my father's schedule, accompanying him on site visits, making rounds of greetings, to negotiating salaries. Previously, I was just commuting between the company and home as a clerk. I only occasionally talked to people in the office and mostly faced the computer. Now, meeting people has become the main part of my job, and I talk much more. It's a big change from before. However, I now find it incredibly enjoyable. Being a manager is a glamorous job, but it's not just about that. I support my father behind the scenes so he can concentrate on his acting career. The work hours are irregular, and adaptability is required. Above all, it's a job that allows me to support my father closely. I want to repay him properly for all the worry I've caused. It's a job I've just started. There will surely be many challenges. But I want to face forward and do my best. Beside my beloved father, I continue to do my best today.
I never filled out the paperwork for our marriage, and there won't be any division of assets. I'm marrying my 20-year-old employee.
Christopher's eyes sparkled as if his prank had been a huge success.
Surprised, huh? The truth is, we're not officially married. We're not husband and wife. I never filled out the paperwork. So you have no right to blame me for my affairs.
Christopher and I have been living together as a married couple for 3 years. His effervescent smile, the likes of which I've never seen before, makes me uncomfortable.
Thank you so much for taking care of my mother. But I don't need you anymore, so let's get a divorce. Oh, no, I mean, let's just end our cohabitation.
I can't hide my shock at his confession from the bottom of my heart. You're lying, right? Please tell me this is some kind of joke. I was filled with disbelief. Wait, you don't know anything? The more he laughs, the calmer I become. Because it's Christopher who doesn't know anything and is misunderstanding things. I'm Patricia, 32 years old. I've been married to the company president for 3 years. We don't have any children yet. Hearing just that, you might think I'm a graceful wife, but in reality, I'm living a pretty tough life.
Your posture is terrible. Straighten up.
Oh, I'm sorry. When my mother-in-law Barbara scolds me, I immediately straighten my back. I reflexively reacted to Barbara's voice, but right now I'm at home folding laundry. I'm not in front of others or having a meal. The home I share with Barbara is not a place where I can relax. I met my husband Christopher about 5 years ago at the hospital. It started when Christopher's mother, my current mother-in-law, was hospitalized for a minor stroke. I was working there as a nurse. Barbara is almost completely paralyzed on one side of her body and can't move as she wishes. Despite the hardships of hospital life, she always kept a calm face. She shows respect not only to the doctors but also to us nurses and the cafeteria staff. Even when afflicted by illness, her noble character remained unchanged. Apparently, she's the wife of the president of a well-known company in this area. As expected of a president's wife. I admired her. Then Barbara remembered my name, and we gradually became close. She brought up the idea of marrying her son Christopher, which brings us to today.
I'm home.
Welcome back. You must be tired from your business trip.
Yeah.
Around the same time as our marriage, my father-in-law passed the position of president to Christopher. I live with my husband's retired parents and support the family behind the scenes.
Here, I brought you a souvenir. Eat it as a snack with Mom and Dad.
Thank you, as always. Christopher is 40 years old this year. It seems he had a few girlfriends, but he never got married. Barbara pushed him, and he ended up marrying me. He's a man of good conduct and devoted to his work. He never fails to bring me souvenirs when he goes on business trips. Why did such a wonderful man remain unmarried until his late 30s? Of course, there's a reason for that. It's because he has a hidden difficult personality. After finishing my work for the day and entering the bedroom, I sat down on the bed. Enveloped by the soft bed, I unintentionally let out a deep sigh. At that moment, Christopher, who should have been sleeping in the bed next to me, turned to face me.
What was that just now?
Sorry, I'm just a little tired.
Why? Why are you tired?
The calm demeanor Christopher had shown in the living room earlier was gone, and he questioned me in rapid succession.
Hey, answer me.
Why are you tired when you don't even work, Patricia? My daily life is pretty tough. I prepare breakfast from 6 a.m. and then we eat. In between, I have to assist Barbara, who has a physical disability. The house has been remodeled to be accessible, so she can live in a wheelchair, but Barbara tries to walk on her own feet as much as possible. If that were all, I might still have some breathing room. But at Barbara's recommendation, I attend cooking classes and etiquette classes. On top of that, I do clerical work at Christopher's company 2 to 3 days a week, so my schedule is packed tight. I don't have time to enjoy spa treatments or afternoon tea like the beautiful president's wife you see in TV dramas. Moreover, Barbara is always watching, so it's impossible to take even a short break on the sofa. Taking care of the house and your mother-in-law is a given as my wife. Those classes are just a hobby, right? If you are a well-mannered person to begin with, you wouldn't need to do them now. Don't tell me you're calling just helping out with the family business work, are you? Christopher laughed in exasperation. When I remained silent, lacking the energy to argue back, Christopher looked satisfied as if he had refuted me. I used to complain to Christopher that it was tough not having time to rest, but I've stopped doing that. There's no point in saying anything, and it only makes me more tired. It's true that every day is hard. But the reason I can continue this life is that I can see the results. Patricia, do you have a moment? Barbara called out to me. I braced myself, thinking I might have made some mistake. The flowers you put in the entrance are so beautiful. They really show your easygoing and kind personality. When I'm praised by the strict Barbara, the joy feels 2 or 3 times greater. At first, I was scolded all the time and often cried at night. Finally, I'm becoming able to behave in a way that's not embarrassing for a president's wife. However, Christopher dislikes doing things together as a married couple. Even for parties where married couples are expected to attend together. It's embarrassing if you come, so you don't have to. He refuses. I think it would be more embarrassing to be seen as a wife who doesn't support her husband, the president, but pretend you caught a cold that day. He ends the discussion with that one line. The story of how we met at the hospital has been slightly distorted, and with my pale skin and slender build, I'm thoroughly perceived as a sickly wife. I've become someone who rarely appears in public. Christopher, who outwardly shows concern for my health in such situations, is a kind, wife-caring husband only on the surface. Behind his smiles, he mocks me, and though he's undoubtedly having an affair, in the midst of my busy days. I've noticed lipstick on his shirts. And not just once or twice. It's probably a blatant provocation from his mistress. It seems even his mistress looks down on me. I carefully hand-wash the lipstick stains on his shirts, but a faint pink color remains. Lipstick? I don't know anything about that. I sometimes go to places with hostesses for business entertainment, so maybe it got on me then. I've confronted him about the lipstick before, but Christopher wasn't fazed at all. The lipstick was on the inside of his shirt, where it couldn't have gotten unless he took his clothes off. Huh? Wait, are you suspecting me of cheating? That's right, I am cheating. So what? Is that bad? Though I was determined not to let him make excuses, Christopher's cheerful and composed demeanor left me speechless. Just kidding. I don't have time for an affair. I'm an extremely busy president, you know. I'm occupied with business trips and entertaining clients. Oh, I have another business trip next week. I feel like I might collapse from overwork. I'm not like you, with too much free time on your hands, imagining strange things. I work so hard to provide you with decent meals, even sacrificing my sleep, and you say such horrible things. But you know what? What if I really were having an affair? You want to get divorced? Even though you're unemployed? I wonder what I hoped to achieve by pursuing Christopher's infidelity. I had expected him to either apologize or get upset. I never thought he'd tease me with a twinkle in his eye. His unexpected reaction stops my thoughts. The word divorce flashes in my mind. But I don't have the time to think deeply or the energy to take action. Just the same hectic days passed by as always. Then one day, I was scolded by Barbara.
You are Christopher's wife. Behave in a way that doesn't embarrass you as a wife and a member of this family.
She may have noticed my cold attitude towards Christopher. Barbara's words weigh heavily on my already burdened heart. Furthermore, Barbara presented a harsh proposal.
Patricia, you need to work more. What?
Work. I'm already exhausted. I thought I was doing a perfect job with the housework, but what kind of unreasonable demands will she make now?
Work at our company. Not just a few days a week, but more.
That's what Barbara said. I unconsciously shouted.
Impossible. I can't.
For the first time, I saw Barbara's mouth hanging open in surprise. My brain tells me not to say it, but my mouth moves on its own.
I've had enough. It's impossible. I can't work any more than this. Your son's wife isn't free labor. I'm not a convenient tool to be used for free. I can't do any more than this without even getting paid, just because I'm your son's wife.
My voice cracked halfway through. It's pathetic to cry in front of others as an adult, but I couldn't hold back the overflowing emotions. Actually, I'm being forced to work for free at Christopher's company.
Even if I receive a plentiful living allowance, my spirit is just wearing down without being compensated for my labor.
Barbara's face, frozen in shock, quickly contorted. And from Barbara's mouth, I hear unexpected facts and plans. In the end, strongly urged by Barbara, I prioritized work. I quit the etiquette classes, but I have no time to rest as I do housework, support Barbara, and work. I convinced myself that the busier I am, the better I can forget Christopher's betrayal. But one night, Christopher's ultimate betrayal is revealed. Can you leave now? Suddenly being told this late at night in the bedroom, I lifted my heavy eyelids, already half asleep. Christopher stands with his arms crossed, looking down at my face from above.
Why? I'm already sleeping. If you don't like sharing a bedroom, you sleep in the guest room tonight, Christopher.
It's a stupid prank to deliberately wake me up and try to kick me out. Christopher is grinning as if he's plotting something. He's probably been drinking. That's why he's become bold and is picking a fight.
Huh? Don't get the wrong idea. I want you to leave this house, not just this room.
I rub my eyes and tilt my head. Christopher raises his chin and smiles, looking pleased. For now, get up. You're not allowed to be here anymore. Get out right now. We're getting divorced. Oh, wait. Maybe I won't divorce you after all. He's saying strange things. Maybe because I'm still half asleep, I can't understand the meaning.
Why a sudden divorce? Huh? Did you get serious with your affair partner?
It feels like I'm dreaming. Since Christopher was laughing, I wasn't scared of him and I couldn't help but to ask him straight. After I spoke, it crossed my mind that Christopher might get angry, but unexpectedly, he opened his eyes wide and burst out laughing. He was laughing so hard, clapping his hands and holding his stomach. You're misunderstanding. You have no right to accuse me of cheating. You're making one big mistake. Didn't you know about that? Of course you wouldn't. Just when I thought he was suddenly provoking me, the next moment, he made a shocking revelation.
I'm marrying a 20-year-old employee. I never filled out our paperwork for marriage, so there's no property division.
Still unable to stop laughing, Christopher proudly dropped a huge bombshell on me, his shoulders shaking.
What?
I was stunned and at a loss for words.
You didn't know, right? Believe it or not, we're not married. We're not husband and wife. The truth is, I never filed for a marriage license. That's why you have no right to blame me for cheating. Patricia, your mouth is hanging open. You look stupid. Oh well, I guess it can't be helped. It's shocking to be told we're not married, isn't it?
Christopher's eyes sparkled as if his prank had succeeded. We had been living together as husband and wife for 3 years. I had just been told that these entire 3 years were a lie.
Remember when we got married? On our anniversary, I surprised you by presenting the marriage certificate. Well, that was a lie. I never filed it. So, Patricia, you're not a wife, just a live-in partner.
Christopher had a bubbly smile I'd never seen before. I couldn't tell if he was happy because he could marry a young girl or if he was enjoying tormenting me. Either way, it was an unpleasant smile. Thank you so much for taking care of Mom. Thanks to your support with her rehabilitation, Mom is now able to manage her daily life to some extent. I appreciate it. Well, since I don't need you anymore, let's divorce. Oh no, my bad. Let's end our cohabitation, please. It's not a divorce, so there's no hassle of alimony or property division. It would be great if you could leave soon. Christopher wiped the corners of his eyes, laughing so hard that tears were welling up. The more he laughed, the calmer I became. Because it was Christopher who knew nothing and was misunderstanding.
Wow, you don't know anything, do you?
Christopher still didn't drop his mocking laugh. I was truly shocked to hear his confession. You're lying, right? Please tell me this is some kind of joke. We're not married? There's no way. I held my head in disbelief. I know it's hard to believe, but I never had any romantic feelings for you from the start, so I had no intention of marrying you. But I needed someone to take care of Mom, and I was at a good age, so I figured I could keep you by my side as a wife temporarily. I can't believe this. Yes. It's unbelievable, right? But I'm tired of laughing, so accept the reality. It seemed Christopher's laughter had settled down too. He must have been satisfied after thoroughly insulting me.
No, I still can't believe this.
I was still in shock. Christopher, who was satisfied on his own, now began to get irritated with me for not keeping up. What is it with you? We're not married, so get out. You're slow on the uptake. Normal people would understand. I can't put it any simpler than this.
That's not it.
I took a breath and told him.
I can't believe you thought we weren't married.
I looked straight into Christopher's eyes and conveyed it.
If we're not married, why do I have the same last name as you? I caught a cold a few times and went to the hospital, and I've renewed my driver's license. I've been living with that name for 3 years. There's no way we're not married.
Now it was Christopher who couldn't understand.
Did you really think you could deceive me for years just by not filing a marriage license? That kind of lie would be exposed immediately, wouldn't it? Didn't it ever occur to you that it might be exposed through hospital or government procedures?
Christopher's gaze darted back and forth, becoming restless. He finally seemed to realize that he was no longer in a position to laugh.
I really can't believe you.
Christopher's plan was far too foolish. He appears to act like a respectable president in public, but I worry about how empty his head must be.
I can't believe this. You've been deceiving me?
For some reason, Christopher acts like he's the victim, stumbling backward.
Deceiving? I never imagined you thought we weren't married in the first place. That's a lie. Then when did you realize I was single?
The day after you surprised me with the marriage certificate.
Wait! You knew that long.
As Christopher's body recoils in shock, I can't hide my own surprise. We had finished our engagement party and started living together a month before the wedding. But Christopher insisted on having the ceremony on a special day like Christmas or a birthday, so he kept delaying submitting the marriage paperwork. I had been waiting all this time, only to be suddenly told about a surprise wedding on some anniversary.
You were so particular about the wedding date, so I found it odd that you decided to get married on the anniversary of our first movie date. I don't even remember that anniversary. It was just an excuse, wasn't it?
Christopher hunches his shoulders, making himself smaller. I continue speaking in a monotone.
But the next day, I found our marriage paperwork tucked in a stack of old newspapers. I was so puzzled about why it was there when it should have been submitted to the city hall.
Just as Christopher tilts his head in feigned confusion, the bedroom door swings open. I instinctively straighten my posture. There stands Barbara.
That's right. I was the one who found that unsubmitted paperwork. I was baffled by such an oversight.
I hurriedly leap off the bed and rush over to Barbara, who was leaning against the wall. As I lend her my arm, Barbara fixes her sharp gaze on Christopher.
Dismayed by your carelessness, Patricia and I went to submit that paperwork ourselves. To think you intentionally didn't submit it. How dishonest of you!
Scolded by Barbara, Christopher's demeanor takes a complete turn. He suddenly prostrates himself on the floor, shouting apologies at the top of his lungs.
I'm sorry. It's not like that. I just wasn't ready to get married yet, but I did intend to marry her someday. Even though you've been deceiving Patricia all this time?
Christopher desperately searches for his next excuse, shouting again.
That's not it. I forgot we weren't married. Did you also forget what you just said a moment ago? You're the one who blurted out that you weren't married. You were so loud, the whole house could hear you. Not that I make a habit of eavesdropping.
Christopher opens and closes his mouth, but no words come out. He probably envisioned kicking me out so he could happily marry his young, pretty mistress. And his parents would welcome such a bride with open arms. That must have been the blissful plan he had in mind. Too bad. He can't get rid of me that easily, and Barbara is furious with him. His dismay is plain as day. Philanderers tend to get carried away in their own heads, unable to accurately predict other people's reactions.
Your excuses only make you look pathetic. What you first spat at Patricia must be how you really feel, right? Mom, I'm sorry.
Barbara lowers herself and grabs Christopher's head in a vice-like grip. Forcing his face upward, Christopher's lips tremble.
Don't you think you're apologizing to the wrong person? Huh?
As Barbara loosens her hold, Christopher crumples back onto the floor like a puppet with its strings cut.
If you want to marry your mistress, then sincerely apologize to Patricia and file for divorce properly. You're the one who'll pay alimony. And don't forget about dividing the assets.
Christopher's ragged breathing fills the air. Patricia, my bad. With his face still buried in the floor, Christopher chokes out an apology. It doesn't sound heartfelt in the slightest.
Mom. You're my mom, aren't you? Don't side with someone else over me.
The next instant, a crisp smack rings out. Barbara had slapped the back of Christopher's head. As he raises his face in shock, Barbara's palm comes swinging down again. Without any hesitation, Barbara slapped Christopher's cheek this time. The usually gentle Barbara contorted her face like a demon as she struck Christopher. It was Christopher who was hit repeatedly, yet my body was the one trembling.
Mom, why are you hitting me? Who are you calling an outsider? Patricia is your wife. My daughter.
Barbara raised her voice for my sake. Christopher, I'm fine with divorce. I was prepared for it to come to this. I dared to smile at the cornered Christopher. This seemed to ease Christopher's tension a little. I hope you can finally find happiness by marrying that 20-year-old girl. Thanks, Patricia. You weren't a bad woman either. I hope you find happiness in your next marriage too. Oh wait, that's impossible. You're already over 30, right? Just when the atmosphere was getting better, Christopher couldn't bring himself to wish for my happiness. He had been looking down on me all along. Barbara let out a deep sigh, prompting Christopher to hastily compose himself. Just as Patricia says, divorce properly and start a new life with the woman you love, Christopher. There's no need to continue a broken marriage. Yeah. I'll do that then. With Barbara's blessing for his marriage to the other woman, Christopher relaxed his face. Patricia, I'm really sorry. How insincere. Christopher came to apologize but whispered softly in my ear. No matter what she says, Mom still loves her own son more than someone else's daughter-in-law. Surprised, I recoiled, only to see Christopher sticking his tongue out. Barbara, do you really love a son like this? I pointedly asked Barbara, gesturing at Christopher. Cowering, Christopher stammered. That's not true. I didn't say anything. But his voice reached Barbara, who was right next to me. You. Barbara's fist trembled. It looked like she might let her clenched fist fly instead of words next. That's not it. I just meant that Mom is on my side. Because we're a family. A parent and a child. And you were always so hard on Patricia. Because she's an outsider, right? Even now, you're just pretending to be on Patricia's side to be polite, because she's an outsider, right? Christopher clung to Barbara. His words were so outrageously self-centered that Barbara's anger dissipated into a curt response. I had expectations for Patricia. I was guiding her to be worthy of being my daughter-in-law. If I didn't care, I would have left her alone. Like I did with you, Christopher. I knew about your infidelity for a while, but didn't think to scold you before it blew up like this. I may have put Patricia through a painful experience. But understand that I never disliked Patricia. Barbara squeezed my hand, and I nodded deeply. I knew how she felt ever since she told me to work harder. That's why I can overcome any hardship. Christopher still seems to be under some misconception. But I won't interfere with your new life at all. Live with the woman you love, just the two of you. Patricia, us parents, and the company you inherited from your father were telling you to abandon everything and enjoy your new life. Oh, don't worry about us. Even if you two divorce, you'll stay by our side, right, Patricia? At Barbara's question, I nodded firmly. And you don't need to worry about the company either. Huh? I'm having my daughter take over. Daughter! But I don't have any siblings. Saying that, Christopher's wide eyes were fixed on me. Barbara also gave me a gentle look. Glancing between their faces, I nodded again. Yes. I will now protect the precious company that Barbara and her husband built. Understanding the situation, Christopher crumpled to his knees. Christopher's parents had discarded their own son and were planning to have me, as their daughter, inherit the company.
You'd go that far over a little cheating. You're choosing an outsider over me.
That's right. If it were just a single mistake, we might not strip you of your position as president.
But you know, we know everything.
Christopher swallowed. Then my father-in-law Brian slowly emerged. The defiance drained from Christopher's face.
Christopher, being the president doesn't mean you're the company's supreme ruler who can do anything without consequences. News of your misdeeds has reached my ears. I may have retired, but I haven't lost my connections.
My father-in-law rarely came home even after retiring. Apparently, he had been supporting the company from behind the scenes.
First off, you seem to think womanizing is the norm, hitting on every young female new hire. You showered those who agreed to date you with expensive gifts, and pressured those who refused with presidential orders. Either way, female employees kept quitting. The environment got so bad that even male and veteran employees left.
Christopher trembled pathetically, unable to make any excuses. He shuts up in front of the dignified Brian.
Furthermore, you put in way too much overtime and took too many business trips. I know most of those were unnecessary. What kind of work were you doing while dragging young female employees along?
Christopher hung his head even lower. Rather than fooling around too much at work, it seems he was barely working at all. I'm amazed the company lasted 3 years under a president like this.
How many employees do you think suffered because of you? You embezzled company funds too. That's a crime. You can't be allowed to continue as president.
Christopher's parents had given up on him precisely because they had investigated this. And they asked me, who had diligently devoted myself to the family, to become the new president. Christopher had lost his parents, his absolute allies. He thought he stood above a crowd of employees, only to suddenly fall from grace.
Christopher is the one who needs to leave this house.
He slowly sat up, blankly staring at the night sky above. Brian grabbed Christopher's arm and mercilessly tossed him out into the pitch-black darkness. After that, Christopher and I successfully divorced, and he paid me the compensation I deserved. Of course, we also fairly divided our assets. Furthermore, Brian made Christopher return the wages he had embezzled from me. My work was not for free, after all.
The company's money is my money, isn't it?
Surprisingly, he had little savings, and after repaying the embezzled funds, Christopher only had a few $1,000s left. So, he selfishly demanded a share of the company's money too.
What kind of thinking is that? The company's money is not your money. But I didn't get any severance pay. Isn't it awful to suddenly be fired as the president without any severance?
He doesn't seem to understand the gravity of his crimes, but he'll learn the hard way soon enough.
What you did was embezzlement. It's a crime. It's only a matter of time before you get arrested. Did you really think there would be no punishment after flagrantly embezzling on such a large scale? What? Really?
Having lost his title as president and with no money, 40-year-old Christopher was quickly dumped by his 20-year-old mistress. Christopher's head was indeed empty. He tried to find a new job, but after experiencing life as a king, becoming a regular employee felt humiliating. But he didn't want to get caught by the police. I could sense Christopher's desperation.
I want another chance. I want to be the president again. Let's make up. I won't fail this time. I just want a chance.
Then apply normally. If it's meant to be, maybe you'll get hired as a new employee.
No way, it's me, remember? The former president? At the very least, I should be an executive or something, right?
Too bad, but I take back what I said. If he does formally apply, I'll use my authority as president to ensure he doesn't get hired. In the end, Christopher was arrested before he could even start job hunting. The embezzlement alone may have resulted in just a fine. However, Christopher took thoughtless actions.
Patricia, you're the only one I have left. Please help me.
One day, I answered a call from an unknown number, and it was Christopher. His hushed voice sounded withered and desperate.
At this rate, I'm going to be thrown in prison. Hide me. And tell the police I didn't embezzle anything.
Apparently, when he was about to be arrested, he tackled a police officer with all his might and ran away. Where are you now? The small park near my house? Got it. I'll come right away, so wait there. In a sense, he had attempted marriage fraud with me, committed adultery, embezzled funds, and now fled from the police. He was likely acting on impulse without thinking deeply. It made me wonder how such a son was born to his wise parents.
Patricia, thank you. Everyone abandoned me after I stopped being the president, but you're different. I finally realized it. I love you, Patricia, who loves me.
In fact, I had just received a call from the police saying Christopher had escaped. One of the officers hit his lower back and was taken to the hospital. I had no obligation to hide Christopher. Cooperating with the police was my only choice.
I'll be hiding in the park waiting for you to come.
It wouldn't be me going to Christopher, but the police. When I opened the window on the second-floor balcony, I thought I heard a man's scream coming from somewhere far away. Christopher's stalking was resolved, and I devoted myself to my work as president. I had intended to shoulder the heavy pressure alone, but I realized it wasn't something a president should bear by themselves. I am supported by my employees. I didn't want to make the mistake of thinking the president was superior like Christopher did and treat the company as my personal property, so I strived for open communication. Thank you for taking over the company. I feel at ease with you, Patricia. I appreciate your hard work, but remember to prioritize your personal life too, okay? Don't worry about Christopher or us, and if you meet a wonderful person, get married. After the divorce, Christopher's parents adopted me, cherishing me as their daughter rather than their son's wife.
I'm not thinking about marriage. I mean, I'm already in my mid-30s.
Did you imagine becoming the president in your 30s?
No way. That was completely unexpected.
Then you can't say marriage is impossible either. It's your life. Live it joyfully. Barbara's face was etched with deep wrinkles as she smiled warmly.
Well, I never thought I'd run into someone with just a high school education, low level, in a place like this.
I was just as surprised to reunite with Amanda 12 years after graduating high school. And of all places, on a plane as I was about to embark on a vacation. Not wanting to engage further, I gave a brief greeting and headed to my seat. The incident occurred 30 minutes after the plane took off.
Nobody move.
A suspicious man stood behind the flight attendant. Apparently, the plane had been hijacked. I had no choice. Luckily, I was seated on the opposite aisle from where the hijacker was, so I tried to crawl on the floor unnoticed and inch my way behind him.
Huh?
Seeing me crawling around on the floor, Amanda looked at me with a mixture of fear and bewilderment on her face. Her expression seemed to say not to do anything unnecessary, but now was not the time to worry about Amanda. I had to find a way out of this situation no matter what. My name is Sarah. I'm a 30-year-old Navy sailor. I'm one of the few women assigned to an escort ship, working as a communications officer. I'm not at sea all year round, but I'm often out on the ocean for training and other duties. Usually missions end peacefully, but occasionally we have to rescue stranded ships, transport supplies during disasters, warn suspicious vessels unsettling things do happen. Because of that, I've built up a tolerance for trouble and have grown bolder over the years. Some of my colleagues even say I could be a female ship captain in the future. As a government employee, I basically have weekends off and get extended vacations. During disasters, I have to cancel my time off, but normally it's an ordinary life. I can travel and spend my days off freely. That said, I've developed the habit of staying prepared for emergencies, so I don't really feel like traveling far. Even so, I decided to enjoy a vacation as I turned 30, planning a typical but fun trip to Hawaii. The day finally came and I boarded the plane with a mix of anticipation and nerves. Basking in that happiness, an unpleasant voice stopped me.
Well, I never thought I'd run into someone with just a high school education, low level, in a place like this.
Only one person in my life would start talking to me so rudely without even a greeting. Someone I thought had faded into distant memory. It ruined my good mood.
Hello.
Not wanting to engage further, I gave a brief greeting and headed to my seat.
Hey, you. Wait a minute.
But Amanda seemed to have more to say and followed me to my seat.
Is that any way to act when an old classmate is happy to see you again? Are you just feeling awkward because it's so clear who's winning at life? Winning? I don't feel like I've won or lost anything.
Taken aback that I talked back to her, Amanda continued with a strained expression.
I'll have you know I graduated from Harvard and work at a major law firm. I get so many clients, I'm what you'd call a popular lawyer. Want to know my salary too? Not interested. Say what you want. So stubborn. It's well over $1 million. An amount I bet you'll never see in your life with just a high school diploma.
I had no interest in what she was saying, so I avoided eye contact with Amanda and picked up an in-flight magazine to flip through. Not getting the reaction she wanted, a dissatisfied Amanda kept slinging condescending remarks.
Come to think of it, you joined the Navy, right, Sarah? Still doing that? Yes. I feel sorry for you, enlisting straight out of high school. The pay must be low and there's no chance for advancement. Why not just get married and quit? Oh wait, is there even any demand? With looks like yours.
According to Amanda, she had a fiancé who was also a college graduate working as an elite at a trading company. She looked down on me while bragging about balancing work and love, but I ignored her. A flight attendant eventually came over and told Amanda to take her seat, finally freeing me from the unpleasant exchange. She returned to her seat while making snide comments.
You're in a position to live off our tax dollars, so instead of playing around here, get back to your post and work. A dirty job perfect for those grubby clothes of yours.
I let out a sigh, but steadfastly ignored her. At last freed from Amanda, the plane soon took off. About 30 minutes after rising above the clouds, getting on course, and the fasten seatbelt sign turning off as the aircraft stabilized. I noticed some commotion in the cabin crew area, but I just figured they were dealing with an unruly passenger unfamiliar with air travel. A few minutes later,
nobody move.
The shadowy figure of a suspicious man stood behind the flight attendant. Looked to be around 40 years old.
If everyone remains seated quietly until we land, your safety is guaranteed, so please, stay as you are.
Her voice trembling and eyes glistening with tears, the flight attendant relayed the hijacker's instructions to the passengers.
We still have hours until landing and we can't even use the bathroom?
An elderly man shouted furiously. At that moment,
know your place. This plane is flying somewhere else now. If even one of you makes a scene, this plane will explode.
The hijacker behind the flight attendant suddenly yelled to intimidate the passengers. The hijacker pulled out aluminum foil from his pocket, then took out a battery from his other pocket and made sparks by touching them together. I hesitated about intervening the moment the hijacker took out the foil. But I figured the hijacker must have some objective and wouldn't risk his own life by suddenly blowing up the plane. I had to act fast and get close to the hijacker to stop him before it was too late. As the passengers screamed in terror, the hijacker, just as I predicted, extinguished the small fire he had started.
Next time, I'll start a bigger fire and blow this plane up with it. You there, the one who talked back to me, I'll light the fire right above your head.
The hijacker pointed at an oxygen tank he was carrying on his waist. It was probably a medical oxygen tank. If he were to spray highly concentrated oxygen onto an ignited object, it would undoubtedly cause an explosion big enough to blow up the entire aircraft. If they could at least land somewhere, even if there was an explosion, they might have time to evacuate before the fire spread, but depending on where he started the fire, some passengers could become casualties. I had to stop the hijacker at all costs. The hijacker's fire-starting performance had all the passengers trembling in fear, holding their breath. Looking at Amanda, even that self-centered woman seemed terrified, her face pale as she looked down. Even with her personality, she had grown up in a wealthy family. Both her parents were doctors, and she had planned to go to medical school herself, but struggled with science courses, switched to the humanities, and decided to become a lawyer instead. Because she was someone who always drew attention, information about Amanda would naturally reach my ears even if she wasn't interested. Anyway, putting her aside, if I could somehow get behind that hijacker, she might be able to restrain him. I scanned my surroundings with just her eyes and was relieved to find that her seat was in the hijacker's blind spot. Then, quietly unfastened her seatbelt and assessed the situation. The hijacker was still standing behind a flight attendant, with another attendant forced to stand behind him as a lookout. Judging from the expression on the face of the attendant acting as lookout, the hijacker was probably threatening to hurt the other attendant and passengers if any suspicious movements took place behind his back. How could I get close without causing trouble for her too? Just as I was contemplating this, a well-built man started to put the hijacker into a headlock. This was bad. Rash actions could be fatal. They mustn't provoke him. The man had burned the hijacker's foot using aluminum foil and a dry cell battery.
I told you to stay put or I'll blow up this whole plane. I'll make an example of your crime right here and now. I won't detonate it right away. Not until everyone here fully regrets their own stupidity and mistakes.
With those words, the hijacker started a small fire near the emergency exit where there were no passenger seats, and quickly extinguished it. Whimpers could be heard over the terrorized silence. Then children began to cry.
Yeah, hurry up and admit your sins like that.
I had been worried the crying might irritate him, but the hijacker seemed pleased the more frightened the passengers became.
Well then, before you die, let me tell you the story of my life.
The hijacker began to recount his motive for the hijacking. I had to retrieve that oxygen tank somehow. If it was opened and exposed to even a little spark, it would be the end.
My father was an international airline pilot. That's right, he flew this very route to Australia. He was a workaholic who neglected me and my mother. I bet he was getting cozy with young flight attendants. He rarely even came home. Stayed in hotels after flights. Even when my mother was sick and suffering, he didn't come to see her. He was the worst. So I decided I would have my revenge on him.
The hijacker was lashing out indiscriminately. The passengers began to feel both fear and anger.
Even on the day my mother was on her deathbed a year ago, that bastard knew she was in critical condition but flew this route as usual. he didn't stay with her to the end. He prioritized these frivolous passengers over her. I was trying to find a way to get back at him, but then he went and got sick himself.
According to the hijacker, if leisure travelers didn't exist, his father wouldn't have flown the plane and could have been at his mother's side when she passed. But the person he most wanted revenge against was in a hospital room where he couldn't reach him. So his anger was being directed at the passengers.
That's why I'm going to tarnish his reputation right here.
Excuse me, I'm a lawyer. If you want revenge against your father, why not file a lawsuit? I'll take your case pro bono as a special service. I'm on this flight for work. Please don't lump me in with the other terrible passengers. I was surprised had the gall to make such a suggestion in this situation. Amanda was tougher than me had given her credit for.
Huh? Who the hell are you? You want me to burn you too? I'm not going to forgive that man through some simple method like that. A lawsuit would only get money. I hate selfish, stuck-up women like you the most. My father looked down on people too, thinking he was some elite.
It was a big chance that Amanda had drawn the hijacker's attention. While they were arguing, I slowly and silently pressed her body flat against the floor. Then she began crawling like a lizard.
Don't tell me you're Captain Smith's son?
But I couldn't be bothered with that now. I was trying to get closer to the hijacker from that very spot. In an instant, her chance had turned into a crisis. Amanda noticed me crawling on the floor and gave me an exasperated look.
Huh? Who are you? Seems like you know my dad. What are you, his mistress? Captain Smith doesn't have a mistress. He cared about his family more than anyone. That's easy to say. I don't know what lies he told here, but his actions didn't match. If he cared so much about family, why didn't he come home? Why did he stay at hotels, and who was he staying with?
I knew the reasons. But explanations would have to wait. I knew she had to restrain the hijacker as soon as possible. Since she couldn't approach from behind, she needed to find another route.
I won't allow you to insult him. You can use me as a hostage, so please release the other passengers. Good grief, feisty women are such a pain. What's in it for me, huh? If you want to make it out of here alive, shut your mouth.
The hijacker grabbed the senior flight attendant by the collar and slammed her to the floor. I was convinced. This hijacker wasn't serious. The moment the hijacker created an opening by talking at length, another male passenger lunged at him. I was internally frustrated that the situation had once again taken an unfavorable turn due to someone's reckless actions. It seemed this flight was full of rash amateurs. Even if this hijacker had no real intention of blowing up the plane, the fact remained that he was holding dangerous items. Even if the hijacker didn't mean to, if those were accidentally set off, they would all be obliterated. I sincerely wished they would stop provoking the hijacker any further. Sure enough, the hijacker became enraged and began grappling with the male passenger who had jumped him. If that oxygen tank was activated, it would be disastrous. There was no other choice. Thanks to their scuffle, the hijacker was completely unaware of Sarah's presence. I quickly crawled on her belly, aiming for the hijacker's back.
Huh?
Seeing me slithering around, Amanda looked surprised. Sweating nervously, my expression begged she would not to do anything else unnecessary, but I couldn't worry about that now. Yet Amanda called out to her.
Hey, what are you doing? Trying to escape on your own? And you call yourself a member of the self-defense forces protecting our country? As soon as I get back, I'm lodging a complaint with your workplace. Maybe I'll even press charges.
Her voice was getting rougher and louder, almost alerting the hijacker, so I silenced her.
Can you just be quiet? Don't get in the way.
I whispered right by Amanda's ear as she lightly twisted her arm behind her back. Letting her know that interfering would lead to pain, Amanda finally quieted down. Precious time had been wasted and I was getting more irritated when the male passenger grappling with the hijacker let out a scream.
Ouch! I'll get that lawyer from before to sue you. Everyone take pictures. It's evidence, evidence. Video would be better. Hurry!
Amanda whipped out her smartphone, looking eager to film, so I twisted her arm again to stop her. It was dangerous to carelessly excite the hijacker.
Hey, can you learn already? I said don't do anything unnecessary.
When I spoke forcefully, Amanda muttered under her breath so only I could hear, "I'll sue you too." Meanwhile, the agitated hijacker reached for the oxygen tank. "You, confess your sins to everyone here."
I don't care about my life. I'm ready to do this anytime.
I had to prevent him from opening that valve at all costs. She got within 6 feet of the hijacker, swiftly snatched the tank, and swung it down with all her might, aiming for the hijacker's head, and then there was a light thud. The tank was lighter than she expected, and just as she felt that oddness, the hijacker looked confused rather than collapsing. I had intended to knock the hijacker out by hitting him with the tank, but the unexpected result threw her off for a moment. However, the hijacker also seemed unable to grasp the situation right away, so in that gap, I tackled him, put him in a hold, and successfully restrained him so he couldn't move.
Is the tank empty?
The hijacker remained silent. It seemed he really hadn't intended to actually blow up the plane after all.
Please lend me a couple of ties. Rope would be even better if you have it.
The senior flight attendant immediately handed over a scarf, and a passenger offered a tie. With those, I bound the hijacker's arms and legs, sat him in a seat and secured him with the seatbelt.
Where is the plane headed? Does the captain know about this?
He knows. The plane is probably heading back to Washington Dulles International Airport unnoticed. I believe a SWAT team is being arranged by the airport.
The senior flight attendant quietly informed Sarah so the hijacker wouldn't overhear. Amanda rubbed her arm that I had grabbed in an exaggerated show of pain. The moment she realized the hijacker was restrained and we were safe, she looked at me and started ranting about something.
Everyone has human rights. The way that woman acted disregarded those rights. Even if she's in the self-defense forces, it's unacceptable. She put us in danger, assaulted me, and ignored that man's human rights. I'm filing a lawsuit against her later.
The other passengers all recoiled. The passenger who had been put in a headlock and burned by the hijacker began protesting against Amanda.
Hey, you're suing the wrong person. I'm the one who got burned by that guy. If anything, that woman helped us, didn't she? And if she's in the self-defense forces, that's reassuring. She's our savior. It's because of lawyers like you that evil never disappears from this world. How rude! I was just saying that woman's methods were too rough.
As Amanda argued back, the passengers booed her for this and that.
Hey! You say something too. When it comes down to it, dash. Shut up! This is no time for games. Our safety still isn't guaranteed. Quietly wait for landing.
The passengers, including Amanda, fell silent. The hijacker, while restrained in his seat, didn't seem to have any will to resist and sat quietly. I thought he wasn't serious because he had reacted strangely to the story about his father, and I could see a flicker of wavering emotion on his face. Also, judging from the fact that he hadn't burned the senior flight attendant, he was probably showing a bit of consideration for women. If he really intended to die with the plane, he would have injured people regardless of gender. And the way he kept starting small fires with bits of aluminum foil and immediately extinguishing them made it seem like he was being careful to avoid a major fire.
I also know about Captain Smith. 3 years ago, when a mysterious fire broke out on his aircraft, he made an emergency landing near the coast. Thanks to landing in shallow waters, although half the fuselage sank, all the passengers were unharmed. The fire was put out before it spread, and our escort ship rescued that plane. His quick judgment prevented the plane from being engulfed in flames and saved the passengers and crew. He was an admirable captain.
The hijacker listened with an angry expression. It was a recent incident, so he probably remembered it too.
Everyone, I sincerely apologize for subjecting you to such a terrifying experience on your important travel flight. This aircraft is now returning to Washington Dulles International Airport. We judged that a long flight would be dangerous with hazardous materials on board. At Washington Dulles, we ask that you once again confirm your health and safety. Alternate flights will be arranged, so please use those.
The cabin became noisy with passengers' sighs and complaints. Amanda was riled up, saying she would sue the whole airline.
Everyone, we are truly sorry. We will do our utmost to serve you until arrival, so we would be grateful if you could stay with us on this flight a while longer.
As the senior flight attendant politely made this request, in-flight service began. Gradually, the passengers settled down and started chatting with those in neighboring seats. I stood in front of the hijacker to keep watch over him.
You're with the Maritime Self-Defense Force. Getting in my way. I serve on an escort ship. I only met Captain Smith during that incident, but I remember him communicating with his wife by radio after being rescued by the escort ship.
That's right, Captain Smith always carried a portable radio so he could contact his wife anytime. So they could feel each other's presence even in an emergency. He apparently had his wife get an amateur radio license too. Since I'm in this line of work myself, I found it a very interesting story.
He talked about his son too. He said when he encouraged his son to also get a radio license, his son, a high school student at the time, told him, "I don't have confidence I could handle communications cutting off in a worst-case scenario. Let me hear your final words face to face." He laughed sadly as he recounted it.
When I shared that story, the hijacker suddenly started choking up with sobs.
This may be like pouring salt on the wound, but I immediately understood why Captain Smith didn't go straight home after flights and stayed at hotels. It was because his wife was sick. I think he was very worried about possibly bringing infectious diseases from abroad to his immunocompromised wife. We have crew members like that too.
The last few years in particular had strict regulations due to a pandemic-like outbreak of infectious disease, and everyone was on edge about infection. It overlapped with the time this hijacker's mother was bedridden. The hijacker cried even harder. What a pathetic man, despite being older than me. Hard to believe he's the son of the respectable Captain Smith. As both the cabin and hijacker calmed down, I sat in the seat next to the hijacker. But then that woman barged in again.
"Hey Sarah? This was a big catch for someone low-level like you, wasn't it?" "No, I should say, it's precisely because you're both low-level that you understood each other and resolved it,
Having regained her composure thanks to the tranquil atmosphere in the cabin, Amanda nitpicked as if to vent her unresolved frustration. Even after being subjected to a situation like this, prioritizing satisfying her own desire for recognition over the lives of so many people in danger. Even I couldn't contain my anger at that self-centeredness. I thrust the dry cell batteries I had retrieved from the hijacker in front of Amanda's eyes.
You know, these can easily ignite. Even without aluminum foil, if batteries collide, they can explode. They're not covered with insulation yet. What do you think would happen if I shook them right here?
Amanda didn't show any sign of backing down and confidently pushed back.
You think you can do that as a member of the self-defense forces? I could film it and send it to the Maritime Self-Defense Force. You might get fired and lose that part-time job-level salary. Did you seriously think I would actually do it here? Think about it a little. I'm telling you, there was that kind of risk the whole time this hijacker was rampaging. With that brain of yours, I'm amazed you can call yourself a Harvard graduate and elite lawyer. You shouldn't brag. It's disrespectful to other Harvard grads and lawyers.
Even I, who had ignored her ridiculous posturing until now, couldn't forgive this irresponsibility of not grasping the gravity of the situation.
By the way, about this oxygen tank. If it was full and mishandled, we would have been obliterated in an instant. He says it's empty, but it's doubtful he thoroughly checked it was inert by activating it. There's a possibility chemical substances are still inside. Everyone on this plane is still in mortal danger.
The cabin fell completely silent all at once. Amanda returned to her seat with an awkward expression, saying nothing. I also scolded the hijacker.
The commotion you caused isn't over yet. You will be restrained as a captive until the safety of everyone here is guaranteed, and there's no assurance you yourself will make it back alive.
When the hijacker nonchalantly said he didn't care about his own life, I became enraged, grabbed his head, and dug my nails in.
I was holding back a bit since you're older and Captain Smith's son, but no more. Get it together already.
The hijacker complained that his head hurt where I grabbed him.
You have a responsibility to make amends with your life. Even if you don't care, take proper responsibility for the sake of everyone caught up in this flight and for your parents.
The hijacker started crying again. I heard Amanda mutter under her breath, "Vulgar woman." The senior flight attendant came to inform me that we would soon prepare for landing, so I should fasten my seatbelt. But first, I stood up and headed towards Amanda. I wanted to deal a final blow so she wouldn't try to one-up me with any more worthless posturing.
I'm not going to talk to you anymore after this, but let me just say self-defense force members get travel allowances, you know. Serving on an escort ship involves a lot of overseas travel in particular, so my annual salary is higher than yours.
Amanda looked at me with an expression of disbelief.
But I graduated from Harvard, so in terms of brand value, you with your high school education.
The moment Amanda squeezed out those words in a sore loser's retort, other passengers started heckling her, "Shut up, Harvard woman." There are plenty of Harvard grad lawyers these days. I'm a Harvard-educated doctor, and other jeers flew at Amanda. An announcement played asking passengers to fasten seatbelts in preparation for landing, and the cabin quieted after being cautioned by the flight attendants. Upon landing, we immediately handed the hijacker over to the SWAT team. The SWAT team was surprised to see the hijacker so docile, but when I told them how I had subdued him, they were relieved a self-defense force member had been on board. Amanda was subjected to snide remarks from each passenger walking by. She disembarked with an air of awkwardness, looking crestfallen. It seems she didn't go to Australia after that and hurriedly returned to Boston. I intend to take the rescheduled flight to Australia as planned. After confirming Amanda's name wasn't on the passenger list for the new flight, I finally felt at ease and ready to enjoy my trip. When I returned from Australia, I received a letter of appreciation from the police. The incident was the talk of my maritime self-defense force workplace. Later, I heard that hijacker was imprisoned and Captain Smith passed away without ever meeting his son again. Just as the hijacker said he wanted revenge, he ended up disgracing his parents' honor. Online, his life story was exposed under headlines like "Pilot's Son Commits Hijacking and Flamed." He's a pitiful man who couldn't properly recognize his parents' love. Even if it was prevented, the crime of toying with people's lives is heavy. Losing the qualifications to receive the parental love he so desired and squandering the chance to understand each other is probably the worst punishment for him. I also heard some trivial follow-up stories. Apparently, Amanda's engagement was broken off due to incompatible personalities, and she's attending various matchmaking parties but has become infamous as an unreasonable person. I heard the rumors from a friend who's also seeking marriage. It even became a bit of a topic online. A video made the rounds of Amanda going on about Harvard and such, painting her as a socially inept woman despite having her life in danger during that hijacking. This has probably made her prospects for marriage even more distant. I returned to serving on the escort ship. It's not a passenger ship, so I don't have to worry about hijackings, but conversely, when we pick up radio communications from planes or ships in that kind of danger, I've started thinking about whether there are ways we can help. Putting even more effort into my work, I get teased more than ever as the next female captain. But I feel this job is worthwhile. Speaking of marriageable age, I still don't have the slightest inkling, but I've started considering having any future family of mine also get radio licenses and thinking more about marriage and family. Around that time, a coworker 3 years my junior who always comes to me for advice about everything tapped me on the shoulder. "What question do you have this time?" "Sarah, I also have a radio license for work, and how about we keep in touch privately by radio too?" I never imagined such a nice prospect would come my way so quickly. I think communication is most important for both work and private life. Let's keep telling each other what we want to say from now on. Yes! A fulfilling life, both public and private, has begun. A year ago, we surely pledged our love to each other. I decided in my heart to live with this kind-hearted man. However, his attitude completely changed right after the marriage. The loving man he used to be is long gone. My husband no longer sees me as a woman. Now, I'm treated just like a housekeeper. "All you need to do is listen to me and stay quiet." That's his catchphrase. I wonder how long this life will continue. At that time, I had no way of knowing that a ray of light would shine on me. My name is Michelle Jenkins, I'm 28. I work as a secretary at my father's company while also being a housewife. The company, once managed by my grandfather, was taken over by my father 2 years ago. Being the daughter of a business owner, I've always been kept at a distance. The men who approach me are mostly after money. Of course, I've never really been in love. At one point, I stopped telling people about my family background. That's when I met the man who would become my husband, a man named David. I had asked my friend, who introduced us, to keep my status as the boss's daughter a secret. David doesn't gamble or smoke at all. He does drink, but never to excess. He was my ideal man. He would tell me he loved me, that he adored me. I thought I could spend the rest of my life with such a man. However, when I decided to marry David, my father said this: "Michelle, it's fine if you marry him, but could you keep it a secret that you're the boss's daughter?" "Dad, how many times have I told you? He's a very good person. He's not after money at all." "That may be true, but I don't want you to have a hard time because of that." "But if a year passes after you're married and David is still the same, let's talk about the company together. You can apologize for keeping it a secret then." "All right. If you're that insistent, Dad, I'll do as you suggest." I agreed reluctantly with my father's proposition. My father knew of my past heartaches with gold-digging men. And as an overprotective parent, He worried I might get hurt again. I decided I could share the truth with David after a year as per my father's advice. And until then, I would just be an ordinary secretary. And so, under these circumstances, David and I got married. Now, a year after our wedding, I still haven't revealed the truth to him. The reason is simple. He is no longer the kind man he used to be. As soon as we got married, his behavior became cold and distant. He would come home from work, already in a foul mood, and began to nitpick at the dinners I prepared.
Hamburgers for dinner, again? We're not children. Can't you think of anything else?
But, David, you used to love my burgers, didn't you? I've made them countless times before.
Don't talk back. You're always short on dishes. Besides the easy dishes like salad and soup, you should be able to make at least 5 other dishes.
5 dishes. That's a lot. I have work too, you know. I can't manage that much.
What? When I tell you to do something, you do it. I married you, so you should listen to what I say.
I'm sorry. The warmth and kindness he used to show were gone, replaced by a coldness as harsh as ice. At the time, I only thought, he must have had a bad day, but his behavior started to get worse. By the time half a year of our marriage had passed, David had become a full-fledged tyrant. Not just about the cooking, he would complain about everything from the way I folded the laundry to how I cleaned the house. If I tried to protest even a bit, he would yell at me with a terrifying look on his face. Just being yelled at would have been bearable, but sometimes he would even throw the meals I made into the trash. A year after our wedding, his tyrannical behavior hasn't changed, and if anything, it's getting worse. Just the other day, I was delayed at work and didn't get home until after 7 p.m. As soon as I said, "I'm home," he started yelling,
"You're late. What time do you think it is?"
I'm sorry. Work just got a bit out of hand. I'll start on dinner right away."
Work got out of hand? A mere secretary like you don't have that much work to warrant staying late.
But I really did. I'm handling some accounting tasks too, so there's a lot to process.
Don't talk back to me. It's unthinkable for a woman to come home later than her husband. Next time, if you come back later than me, you're quitting your job.
That's not fair. From fear of David, I couldn't talk back. Looking back, I wonder if I should have left him sooner. But I was pushing against the worry of my parents when I married. I couldn't reveal the truth. I didn't want to sadden my mom and dad. So, I silently bore it all by myself. Then one day at work, during a break, my father called me into the reception room. I often went in and out of the reception room because I often assisted my father as his secretary. As I entered, my father was already inside. "What's up?" I asked. My father, looking pleased, replied,
"It's been a year since you got married to David, right? I think it's about time you told him the truth as promised." "Oh, yeah, we had that agreement."
"Is something wrong? You don't seem happy. Didn't you say that David wasn't after the money?"
"Well, yes, but it's just, right now, it's a bit."
Seeing my troubled expression, my father smiled and tried to comfort me, patting my shoulder. "Did you have a fight with David?" "Well, you're both young and newlywed. I guess it's inevitable. My wife and I also had our fair share of arguments back in the day. But look at us now, still happily together. I'm sure you'll be okay, Michelle."
"It's not exactly a fight. Don't worry, everything will be all right. I mean, every couple has their share of arguments, right?"
"Well, I suppose you're right."
"Anything else bothering you?"
"No, nothing really. I'm okay. But I guess I want to wait for things to settle down a bit before I talk to him."
Haha. Well, don't let it get you down too much. A little marital spat is pretty common.
It seemed my father thought we were just having a minor argument. To avoid worrying my parents, I hadn't consulted them about my husband up until now. Because of this, my father seemed to believe things were going well between us.
"Well, you better make up with David soon."
Saying that, my father left the room. Left alone in the room, I was choked with emotions I didn't know how to deal with. I had married David despite my parents' concerns. I absolutely couldn't tell my father about the deteriorating relationship between David and me. But, sooner or later, I'd have to talk about it or risk arousing suspicion. To prevent my father from becoming suspicious, I had to maintain my relationship with my husband somehow. And if possible, I wanted to steer our relationship in a positive direction. That night, I came home on time to talk with David, waiting for him to return. Just as I finished making dinner, he came home. I immediately broached the subject with him.
David, there's something I want to talk about.
Huh? I'm tired, you know.
It's important. Look, we're married, right? I want our relationship to be equal and enjoy our lives together every day.
Equal? Huh? What are you talking about? There's no way you and I are equal.
My husband grabbed my hair, yanking it up harshly.
Ouch!
I couldn't help but cry out, but he didn't let go. As if mocking my wincing face, he slowly opened his mouth.
Listen well. I'm the one who did you the favor of marrying you. Be grateful that I deigned to marry a plain and useless woman like you. Did me the favor? David, didn't you say you loved me? Don't make me laugh. I just pretended to like you because you seemed obedient and would be a handy housekeeper. That's not true. You just need to be quiet and listen to me, housekeeper.
With these words, he yanked my hair towards his face. From that day on, I gave up hoping. There was no chance of us being equals. And I didn't want to worry my parents, nor could I get a divorce. My appetite dwindled day by day, and I ended up just living with my roommate, my husband. Then one day, while living such a life, I woke up feeling completely exhausted.
My head hurts, and I feel a chill.
When I took my temperature, it was a whopping 104 degrees Fahrenheit. I forced my aching body to sit up and called out to my husband.
David, I'm sorry. I don't think I can make breakfast today.
What? Why not?
I've got a fever of 104. I'm in so much pain. Can I just stay in bed for the day?
At this, my husband let out a long sigh and yelled.
Slacking off chores because of a stupid fever? Get to work, you good for nothing.
But, please, forgive me. I'm really sick.
Shut up. Stop making excuses. You're just a housemaid. Don't you dare defy your master.
Please, just for today. I'm begging you.
He clicked his tongue loudly, swung the door open with a bang, and left the room. Next thing I knew, my hands were shaking, and my body was trembling uncontrollably. I finally realized just how close to the edge I was being pushed. If I continue like this, I'll break down for real. Continuing to live like this, it'll drive me mad, body and soul. I need to do something. But what can I do? I want to think of a way out, but my fever is making my head heavy, and I can't think straight. Maybe it was because I'd been on edge for so long, but I fell back asleep. Several hours later, I was awakened by my husband's raging voice.
Hey! Didn't I tell you to wake up, you dumb woman?
Huh.
David.
Outside the window, it was already dark. My fever had gone down a lot, but my body was still heavy, and a faint headache lingered. Despite my state, he vented his anger.
I called you multiple times. What are you doing sleeping?
Called.
I sent you a text saying, I'm bringing my boss home, prepare drinks and snacks, didn't I?
Wait a minute. You knew I was sick today, right? And yet, you brought your boss home.
I invited him to continue drinking at home. My promotion depends on this. Get up and get things ready, now.
No, I can't. I'm still in my pajamas, and I'm not feeling well at all.
Shut up. Just get out here now.
As he yanked me by the arm and forced me to stand in the kitchen, my husband then hurried back to his boss who was likely waiting at the entrance.
Sorry to keep you waiting. Please, come on in.
From the entrance, I could hear my husband speaking cheerily.
Are you sure this is okay? This late? I'm sure your wife wouldn't appreciate.
That's what I've been saying. I don't have a wife, just a housemaid.
A housemaid.
Sort of like a maid wife, you could say. But please, don't mind.
As he said this, my husband led his boss into the living room. I was in my pajamas, without any makeup, so I bowed my head in embarrassment.
Nice to meet you. My husband is always telling me about you. I apologize for my appearance.
I'm the section chief, Mr. Smith. I'm sorry for intruding so suddenly.
Please, don't mind me. I'll prepare something right away.
As I returned to the kitchen, hiding my face, my husband let out a tirade.
Hey! Get a move on and make something! You're absolutely useless!
I'm sorry, just wait a little bit longer.
Instead of opening your mouth, move your hands! Despite the section chief taking the time to visit, how much more do you need to embarrass yourself before you're satisfied? Huh?
I'm sorry.
Sorry about this, Mr. Smith. Our maid is really quite useless. The section chief sat quietly, his face slightly contorted. Even as I prepared and brought over the drinks and snacks, my husband kept making snide remarks like, "You're really useless." When my husband went to the bathroom, Section Chief Smith started to speak. Excuse me. There was no way I could ignore him. Although I was flustered, I responded.
Yes, is there something you need?
You're the daughter of CEO Allen, aren't you? My maiden name was Allen. He was referring to CEO Allen, my father.
What? How did you?
I had previously visited your father's company regarding a business deal. You served me tea then, didn't you?
Wait, you were, from that time?
I usually attended all interactions with our business partners. Each time, I served tea and was introduced as the daughter of Mr. Allen. And Smith, he was one of those people. I was informed that David's workplace had become a client of my father's company, but I had not yet told my father that David was working at Smith's company. While glancing towards the bathroom, Smith continued in a hushed tone.
What's up with your husband's behavior? Is he always like this at home?
Yes.
I can't believe what you've been through. Why haven't you told Mr. Allen?
That is.
Regardless, we can't let this continue. Leave it to me.
Smith, while looking at me straight in the eyes, quickly packed up his things and left. In that moment, I felt as if something that had been restraining me was slowly being untangled. I felt a profound relief, as if I had finally found an ally. On the other hand, when David returned from the bathroom, he was stunned to find that Smith had left.
Why didn't you stop him, you good for nothing?
Despite his shouting, I decided to trust in Smith's words and endure it. Several days later, I was summoned by my father and headed to the company's reception room. Upon entering, I found Smith and a pale-looking David.
What? Why is David here? And Smith, you're here too.
I was confused, unable to understand the situation. In the tense atmosphere, my father started speaking with a stern expression.
I heard from Smith. You've been treated horribly by David, haven't you? I understand. You're kind-hearted, and you wanted to avoid worrying me, didn't you?
Dad.
Thank you, Smith. Thanks to you, I was able to save my daughter.
At my father's words, Smith bowed his head. Immediately afterwards, my father shot a withering glare at the ashen-faced David and coldly stated,
David, I can't believe you turned out to be such a scumbag. I shouldn't have let you marry my daughter. Wait, please!
David pleaded, shaking visibly.
I had no idea you were the president of our business partner. I didn't know Michelle was a CEO's daughter. Shut up! So if you knew, you would have treated Michelle better. You're truly a lowlife. No, there's a reason for this. A reason? I'm going to report you to your company's CEO. I'm acquainted with him, and we have a long-standing relationship. No way.
David filled his eyes with tears and crumbled to his knees. Then he turned to me with pleading eyes.
Michelle, say something to your father for me. You want me to say something, huh?
I raised my voice to vent my pent-up frustrations.
Do you have any idea how much I've suffered because of your overbearing, chauvinistic attitude? I've been holding it in all this time. I tried to improve our relationship. It's you who ruined everything, right? Treating me like a housemaid and constantly berating me. Do you know how humiliating that was? Wait, Michelle. Please forgive me. Shut up. Don't you dare casually call me by my name. No matter how much you apologize, I will never forgive you. I don't care if you fall into hardship, You get what you deserve. If you understand, never show up in front of me again. Stay out of my life forever."
At the end of my outburst, David started crying uncontrollably. Smith grabbed his arm, bowed, and left the reception room. Afterwards, David and I got divorced. When my father informed David's company's president about the incident, he lost his job as well. It seemed David had a poor attitude at work and was fired considering these factors. Because he was fired for a valid reason, he didn't get any severance pay. After the divorce, David apparently went back to his parents' house. However, his in-laws already knew about the incident. I heard his father gave him a stern scolding and kicked him out of the house. Now, he seems to be working day and night at a factory where he can live in. He probably doesn't have much of a cushion since he has to make alimony payments to me. On the other hand, after the divorce, I moved back to my parents' house. Now, I've completely recovered and am focusing on my job. Since then, I've been meeting Smith regularly and we have a good relationship. I'm not considering remarrying yet, but if I do someday, I want someone like him. When that time comes, I hope to build a happy family.